these pictures on the box, they are illustrations from the book. And this was one of my favorite right here. When you first open it, we have this story. This comes from page 59. This is a section that I wrote, and it's titled "Pick One and Then Do the Next." So when you get the box, inside you're going to see a letter from our good friend Chuck Hibbard, and he wrote the foreword for the book. And Chuck, he talks about kind of the reason behind this book and the need. And there's also information on a bulk order. So if you decide that, hey, this is something that's useful and I'd like to get this for our extension professionals in your particular state, you totally can. And that will start June 20th and go through July 20th. But there's tissue paper, and I thought just getting regular tissue paper would be enough. But Jamie disagreed. She wanted to utilize every opportunity to kind of share like the culture of this book. And on this tissue paper, does anyone want to tell me what's on it?
It's the creed.
Yep.
Extension Professionals Creed.
Yeah, so it's the whole Extension Professionals Creed. So you might just throw it away, but we thought, hey, it would be cool to do that. Inside the box are also some things from the book. So as I go inside, there's a pen. So we want you to write in it. At the end of each chapter, there's field notes where you can write down your own wisdom and experiences. And you can highlight things. On this quote, on this pen is a quote, and it says, stop, take time to think, and connect the dots. And so we hope you'll connect the dots with this pen and highlighter. And that comes from Bob Birch. And so that was from his section. Also inside the box is this laser engraved, we've tried that before, bookmark. And it has the design about going the extra mile. Included in the book is another 5 postcards that we talk about writing thank you cards to our clients and the importance of writing a thank you card on an analog material. And so here it is. So thank you cards, we've got 5 of those. And finally, there's a poster inside that you can put up on your wall, but double-sided poster with some quotes. This here is a bonsai tree. For any of those watching Cobra Kai on YouTube Red, that was the inspiration behind this, and then some more illustrations from the book. And of course, inside the custom box is the book. It's about 130 pages of all this great, wonderful advice. So that's what's in the box. There's nothing more I can add here.
All right, so we wanted to invite some of our co-authors that helped put this amazing project together. And so we've got a few of them on with us right now. And if you don't have speaker view on or the round robin on, where the Brady Bunch style, where you can see everybody, you might want to go ahead and flip to that. And then I'll just have them wave as I shout out some names here, so that you know who's who. So Brad Anderson's from Missouri. I'm just going around my Brady Bunch screen. It may not be the same for you. Dave Francis from Utah. Bob Birch from North Dakota. Hunter from Alabama. Daphne Richards from Texas A&M. And Danae Wolf from Ohio State. And they're hopping on today to share some of their experiences with us about how they got involved in the project, why they wanted to get involved in the project, and then maybe share some of their favorite, words of wisdom from the book, whether it was theirs or not. So I think I'm going to start with Brad. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Brad. So do you want to share with us a little bit about why you wanted to get involved with the book project in the first place? Oh, you're still muted. I really do want to hear you talk about it.
It's like the movies I love to watch where the language and the dubbing isn't quite on sync. So I could just do all sorts of, this is great. Okay. The one reason I wanted to be involved is I love working with these people. They are absolutely fantastic, and I've become some of my favorite colleagues in the different adventures we've had. And I really believed in the project. It's the idea that, millennials, boomers, Xers like me all come in with various strengths and perspectives and insights that maybe others might not have. And like Paul said, we really need this collective wisdom right now. So it's a good opportunity. Some of our actual issues are not that different from the early days of extension, but we can bring some new wisdom and new tools together to address them. So it's a great opportunity.
Thanks, Brad. And Hunter had one of my favorite sections from the book where he talks about ignoring the jaded. So Hunter, do you want to give us some insight into what you put into that section and why you felt that this was wisdom that extension professionals might want and need?
Throughout my time with extension, and you mentioned I was in Alabama, so hopefully bandwidth is not going to be an issue today. Throughout my time with extension and with this project, when you and Paul asked if I would be interested in helping out with it, it was probably the first thing that came to my mind after reading through the original work and then looking at this, was just one of the issues that we all kind of encounter either as a young agent just coming on board. You've got some of the people that have been around for a day or so telling you, oh, don't burn yourself out. Don't work too hard. Things aren't as good as they used to be, but it's still, it's still an okay job. And some of that, even to me, was kind of getting to me and making me maybe think about the way I did things. And so finally one day I just realized that those people are jaded. They're not important. They are to the system, but the way that I think, they're not really playing into that. And so whenever I started working on this, I thought that probably needs to be the piece of information. I wish I had heard that. Stay away from those negative people. Stick with people like I have here that are positive and that push you to work harder and to be innovative and to do new things. Don't be afraid to try the things that didn't work before. Be willing to try new things that people have said won't work. And so it's just been a really fun experience. And I always I think I told Bob a few weeks ago on his podcast, I've got at least 34 more years to get in with extension. If everything works out the way that I hope that it will. And I don't see that as I've got to stay here for 34 more years. It's just 34 more years of trying to make this little system a little bit better than it was before I found it. And so hopefully they can learn from that.
Daphne, how about you? Give us some insight into what you selected to include and why.
Well, I selected Be Energetic, and to me, that really resonated. So when I saw that section, I knew that's the section I wanted to focus on and write about myself. As new extension agents, we all follow someone who was probably in their job in the seat before us for at least 10 years, maybe longer. And so you get there and you don't know anywhere near as much as the person before you. So you've got some pretty big shoes to fill. Many extension agents have their own radio shows. They're on TV. They write newspaper columns. They get recognized in the grocery store, just walking down the street. And so it's intimidating to come in and take that person's place. And so I found early in my career that I didn't know everything. I was willing to admit that. But what I could bring to every interaction was energy and a positive attitude. And that made a really big difference. I'm a horticulture agent, so I work with volunteers, I have a Master Gardener program. And so just getting to know those people, showing up every day, being authentic, being myself, being open, and just pushing that reset button. When you have a hard day as a new agent, you might have an interaction where someone questions you at a presentation you're doing and you don't know the answer and they're not nice to you about it. You've got to go home and reflect on that and forgive yourself and get up the next day with a new, fresh attitude and positive energy and hit the ground running again. So that it just really resonated for me. So I wanted to focus on that, being energetic.
That was one of my favorite sections too, by the way. So Bob has a podcast called Working Differently in Extension. Paul, can you stick the link to the podcast down there just in case anyone who's watching this now or later hasn't listened to Bob's amazing podcast yet? Based on some of the guests that you have had in the past and the conversations that you've had on maybe what's lacking a little bit when it comes to onboarding and extension, or sharing the wisdom that, those of us that have been in the system for a long time, or those that have retired after maybe 3 or more decades in the system, talking about what happens to all of that knowledge that walks out the door, just based on any conversations that you've had in the past along those lines. How is this book maybe helping with that, or what are your thoughts?
My first thought is, if you are looking to start a network to make your extension work better and more innovative, just go through the authors list and follow everybody on Twitter or Facebook. I think that's really one of the valuable contributions is, as I've talked to people over time on the podcast, a lot of people have felt like they were lone wolves as they did these innovation efforts or did something new and different, and didn't feel, it's not that they didn't feel supported, they felt like they were really going out on a limb within their organization. And I think if you start to get connected, to people inside of your organization, but also across the country in extension, you realize there's a lot more of us than we thought. And it's been really important to be able to learn from those people for me. And this just collects it all in one place, or at least a good starting point of it in one place, with some wisdom and some directions to go. But I would take it as a jumping off point. I hope everybody gets the book, reads the book. It's awesome. There's great advice in it, great information in it. But use it as a jumping off point to connect with some of the people in the book, and hopefully lead you to others who can continue your professional learning together throughout your career. Because, Paul said he's not going to do another one of these until the end of his career. So I don't even know if I'll live that long. So, so this might be your shot to kind of start and jump off, and then take it on your own and start collecting that wisdom through others.
So Dave wrote, added on to our final thought in the book. And when you get the book, you'll see, if you don't already have it, you'll see what's in the back there. But Dave kind of added a couple words and some wisdom at the end. And Bob talked about using the book kind of like as a jumping off point. So Dave, based on what you included at the end, at the final thought, how could people take those words of advice and use that kind of as a jumping off point to maybe get some inspiration, get some more motivation, and move forward in their work?
Well, this is going to sound contrary, but failure is always an option, and that's okay. And so being willing to accept that not everything you do is going to work the first time or at all, accept that, but don't give up. Don't paint this wonderful picture of extension. Too many times in an extension office, I go in there and I see that Norman Rockwell picture of the 4-H agent and all the kids lined up with their project book to get that taken, to get it all checked off. And we think that, for example, well, guess what? It doesn't always come out in that beautiful world, but don't give up and keep trying and learn from your mistakes, because you are going to hit some home runs and you are going to make a difference. But don't just stop trying because it doesn't work out the first time is what I thought. That's where, for me, that's what, if you're going to start with extension, know that you're going to really mess things up the first couple times, and that's okay. You'll learn from it and keep at it.
Yeah. So anyone else have any thoughts on that? Anyone else want to chime in on failing an extension and how the book might play a part in helping people understand the role in our work?
Yeah, I'll say a few words about that. When I had the opportunity to interview with Bob for the podcast, he asked me what audience is great for this book. And I started off by saying, I think a lot of us sort of have this mindset that it's going to be really good for new employees, right? Like new employees coming in and onboarding. But I think it's probably going to be more useful for those veterans of the organization, because they need, more than anyone perhaps, the permission to fail and to come in and do things differently than what they've been doing. How many times have we all heard that we've been doing things for decades because it's the way we've always done it, or because we've found success in that? But the quote that I told Bob, and that we heard this at a leadership symposium that happened at Ohio State a couple of weeks ago, that the greatest predictor of future failure will be relying on our past successes. And I think that there's a lot of really great insight and wisdom into that quote. We tend to just get very comfortable. And this book gives us that opportunity to say, no, like, society has changed a lot and we can too. And going back to what Dave just said, like, a lot of that is just being okay with failing and being okay with being in a place that's uncomfortable. So I think this book is really fantastic for just giving us that permission that we need to say, let's do things differently. If it doesn't work out, it's okay.
Yeah, and having the sections that give stories, we have a lot of stories included in some of our sections that describe that people are already doing, certain things that might be different from what other people have heard or the way that they've been working. And so they might see that, oh, wow, this could work, or I could do this, or somebody else is doing it and now I have proof. So any other thoughts?
I just think that, like Janae said, I wish I'd had this at the beginning of my career, but as I'm looking through as you read through the book, certain themes emerge. Things like, be open-minded and observe so that you can engage, and build relationships of trust and respect, and collaborate with diverse individuals, try new things, take risks, be humble, let your values be your guide. And, as much as I wish that I'd had this at the beginning of my career, I think, like Janae said, this has some pretty timeless information. It's just good reminders for all of us. And if we all could kind of abide by some of these themes and use them to inform what we do next and the way we're going, it's just kind of a win-win for all of us.
I agree. So let's jump into some sharing time, shall we? So does anyone have a burning desire to share their favorite section of the book or favorite quote? Brad kind of helped us segue into that just now. So anyone else want to share what their favorites were from the book?
I'll share my favorite. And so this one comes from the one and only Bob Birch. And first, I won't read all of it, but I will. I wanted to ask Bob a quick question about it. And so this one is titled, this section is called Remember Your Goals. It's on page 49. And my question is for Bob is, how often do you stop, take time to think, and connect the dots? And what Bob wrote in this, he says, the day-to-day grind is distracting, but remember your goals. Don't surrender your focus to just anything that is demanding your attention, even if you think it's only going to take a few minutes. And then he says, which I really love, he says, stop, take time to think, connect the dots by asking yourself two things. And they are, what am I doing and why am I doing it? And when putting this book together, I thought a quote from Jason Fried, I thought this should be on the same page. And it says, workaholics aren't heroes. They don't save the day. They just use it up. The real hero is home because she figured out a faster way. And so, and maybe that way is she was asking herself, what am I doing and why am I doing it? So Bob, how often do you stop, take time to think and connect the dots?
Not as often as I should. Not to should on myself there, Paul. But yeah, I try and do it at least weekly. And a lot of times for me, and I think you have to find your own way to this, for me, it's in conversation. So I have a couple of people that I call battle buddies that understand enough about my work so that I can have a conversation with them and they can kind of open up space for me to connect the dots. They can say, yeah, that makes me think of this thing that I experienced, or have you seen this book, read this book? And that really helps me kind of zoom out. So I try and do that at least weekly. And I have, like I said, a couple of battle buddies that I meet with on a regular basis to do that. So that's my way of doing it. But I think we can do it in the moment all the time. Like, there's been a lot of talk over the last few years about mindfulness. And if you just kind of try and practice mindfulness a little bit and realize how many times in the day you're just doing stuff and your brain is turned off, I was updating some websites earlier today, and I realized my brain is completely turned off doing this. I'm just clicking here and updating stuff. And I don't even know what I was thinking about over here. And so when that happens, like stop and ask those questions. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? And is the thing that I'm doing really matter to the why? And if it doesn't, like change course, just like go for a walk, get away from your desk, put down whatever you're doing, and try and get back in touch with what you want to accomplish and what your bigger goals are.
All right. Who else wants to share favorites?
I'll share one. All right, so one of my favorite sections is one of yours, Jamie, and it's called Do Nothing. Schedule downtime and spend at least 4 consecutive hours each week doing something you love or want to do, but don't have to do. You can even schedule this as nothing time. You might be thinking, I don't have time for this, but you actually do. You just need to reprioritize how you spend your time. By doing nothing, or at least stepping away from your work, you give yourself the flexibility to think, brainstorm, plan, and even daydream. This is where creativity is possible and the seeds of innovation are planted. What are you willing to give up in order to invest in creativity? And the reason that's one of my favorites is because I think it's the hardest one for an extension agent to do, the hardest practice for us to take on. And I will say that I've never yet been successful in getting 4 full hours during the week, but I've started with 1 hour. And so 1 hour I can do, and it really does make a difference in your energy that you bring to your work, your focus that you can have. And I know that at my point in my career, I interact with so many people that have a hard time getting tasks accomplished. So it's hard for me to take time away and do nothing because I never get to actually do the work that I need to get done because someone's always needing me. Someone needs to talk to me about their plant, or a volunteer needs me to help them decide on an issue, or I've got to solve a crisis. A lot of times it's a fire I have to put out. So it's hard when I spend 80% of my day putting out a fire, and then I only have 20% to work on my actual work, to then think of taking a portion of that to do nothing time. But in those times when I take even an hour during the week to just put everything aside, read a book that I want to read that I haven't made time for, a journal article, take a rabbit hole down YouTube and watch cat videos, even that, it really does help my headspace and help me just kind of push that reset button and get back to being able to focus later.
Yeah, that's a great point. Is anybody else good or bad at incorporating nothing time, or are you working on it? Anyone want to chime in?
If I can ride Daphne's coattails, whenever I got my book in, I was kind of sharing it with a few of my coworkers, and I was proud of it for you two and for us. I mean, it's a cool thing. And one of my coworkers opened up the book and saw the time about do nothing, and they said, "Oh man, I don't have time to do nothing." And I said, "Okay." I said, "Let's pretend that that's true." I said, "So you're telling me that you spend every minute that you're at work doing something productive that's for the system?" And I'm like, "Well, and I said, that's where you need to find that time. If you can take some of that time away and spend it for yourself to re-energize your mind, go for a walk, do anything like that, it's just going to be productive." And I think I've been able to, since we've talked about not just about the book, but in other ed tech things and innovation task force, I mean, that's been the thing behind it, is we all get so bogged down. There's phones ringing, my cell phone, my office phone, I've got emails coming in, I've got reports that I've got to send in. And every now and then you just have to stop and put your phone on silent and just have a minute to yourself so that you can collect your thoughts and put things back together. So this was a cool part of the book for me. And I hope that people will not just say, "Oh, we've tried that before."
I've tried that before. I can't get 2 hours a week pulled together to do nothing. Right. Anyone else? Either nothing time or favorite sections or quotes from the book?
I have a quick question for Dave. One of the on page 114 and 15, there's probably the most practical advice in this entire book, and the section's entitled "Invest in a Quality Foldable Hand Truck." And just a tidbit of advice that comes from this is, and whenever I read Dave's work, the voice of Dave Francis is like, it's like when you read something and there's a picture of Morgan Freeman, you always hear it in Morgan Freeman's voice. So Dave says, the essential companion to the hand truck is the plastic tote. Clear and durable, will save time and frustration. As you have storage space and budget, it is helpful to store all materials for a specific activity in one tote. So Dave, you had a story in there. Do you want to share that?
About why my error of my ways.
Yes.
I was young and stupid, and I didn't have a lot of budget. So I bought a very inexpensive hand truck at Office Depot or Walmart, and it had these bungee cords, and I strapped it on, and I'm trying to get it there, and it unbungeed. Is that a verb? It unbungeed and shot off, and like I almost put my eye out because this thing came flying at me. And at that point, you realize there's got to be a better way. There's just got to be a better way. And the irony is, I was just at an event with some extension colleagues, and they got their hand truck out, and it was even better than the one I have. And I thought, I have hand truck envy about how durable and foldable, and like the base was huge. And so all joking aside, it's worth it. I wish we lived in a world where like extension, just like other professionals, show up, here's my flash drive, or can I get on and get my Google Slides? We don't live in that kind of world. We're constantly shopping back and forth. So make the investment and save yourself some hassle and splurge to get a decent hand truck. They're under $200, and they're worth every penny to get a good one.
And if you look at that illustration on 117, there's a picture of what we thought was Dave's hand truck. It's more of like a Red Ryder, but.
And I have seen extension professionals use those. I'm more of a stackable, but that I definitely see a lot of extension people have those as well.
And then some other advice from Dave Francis on 116 are some items that you can include in, say, an off-site tote, in something that's clear and durable.
Well, and I'll chime in too. So one of my my favorite sections, and it's because I get asked this question a lot by people when I bump into them at conferences. So Paul and I have given a few keynotes around the country in the last year or so. But when I talk about innovation, we talk about creating like time and space for just working and thinking differently. One of the questions that I get a lot is, what do I do about my email? So one of Paul's sections on page 58 was called "Your Inbox is Not Your To-Do List." And so he talks about how you shouldn't allow your email inbox to dictate what you're going to do every single day of your life when you're working. So Paul, my question to you is, how can people make that not be their to-do list? What are some tactics that you use to keep that in check?
Oh, I batch my email. So you got to batch it in certain times. So what time works for you? Say for me, I don't like my best creative time for writing, a fact sheet, which I haven't written a fact sheet in a long time, but my most creative time is in the morning after a good exercise. And so what I do and what I'd recommend is to find your, most creative time and then guard that and schedule it out. And what I do is batch email. So I don't check it first thing in the morning. I check it at noon and at 4 p.m. And so when you're checking your email and responding to everyone, you're taking, what could be your most valuable creative time to check off other people's to-do lists. And it says, if you handle your inbox as a to-do list, then anyone in the world can add an action item. Get out of your inbox and create your own to-do list, and then take care of your own things. So yeah, I'll check email at noon and 4, and I'll take care of the things that need to get, be taken care of. But batching those times is so important. Take care of your own to-do list, because when you're taking care of your own to-do list, you're accomplishing the things that you're setting out, your goals, your vision, and making it all a reality for your work and for your future. So.
Yeah, and I have to say, when we were working on the book and we added that section, I started doing that immediately. So I guess I had a leg up on everyone else, but it has made a huge difference in my work productivity every day, and being able to focus on the deep work when I need to and not be sidetracked so often. So Thank you. Made a big difference. All right. Who else wants to share their favorites?
I've got one. Bob had a piece I really loved. It said, focus on your own professional values as well as the values of your community and Land-Grant University. These values will become your guide when the way becomes unclear. So I thought that was really excellent. And my question for Bob is, what advice do you have for people just looking to get in touch with those values?
Thanks, Brad. Yeah, well, not to sound too much like a book you might buy in the self-help section in Barnes & Noble. I'm old. I actually go to Barnes & Noble still sometimes.
What's a book?
Yeah, what's a book? All right, no comment on what's a book on a book launch conversation. But it's about discovering yourself. And that's been a process for me a long time. Like I showed up here without any extension experience 9.5 years ago and didn't really have a lot of opinions or thoughts about adult education. I'd worked in higher ed, so I was focused on undergrad university students for about 8 years. And so I didn't have a philosophy. And that had to develop over time. And the way that I think that happens for a lot of people is to seek out opportunities to learn about yourself. So whatever you might think about some of the survey instruments that are out there, you know, the Myers-Briggs or Real Colors or things like that, that's all data. So I would encourage you to seek those things out and gain data about yourself. That might just be a snapshot. You shouldn't let it pigeonhole you. I can give you all the caveats that I can, but it's still data about yourself. Find colleagues that you can talk to openly and honestly and authentically about your experience and your thoughts about your work. Journal, all the kinds of things that you would think of like, how can I be a better me? And I think some of us do that in our personal lives and we don't ever think about it from a professional standpoint. And I think there's a lot of people working in extension who don't have a personal philosophy about adult education or making change in the world. And I think that is not a good way to operate because you can't get in touch with your values then. What it's led to for me is seeking out the kind of work that I want to do and I think will do my best at, and not just doing the work that my organization or my supervisor or whomever thinks I should be doing. I still have to do that. I do get a paycheck and they require me to do certain things for that. But a lot of the times I'm looking for those things that I can be the most effective at. And that means the things that I care about. So if I don't know what I care about in terms of social change or adult education, I don't have a personal philosophy, I don't think you can truly be effective at it.
Yeah. I want to throw it over to Danae for a minute because Danae's contribution to the book was focusing on going to where people are and reaching people where they're at, not just in a sense of, physical space and engagement that way, but also virtual engagement. So going to where people are online and tailoring marketing efforts that way. And it really speaks to some of the other themes that we saw throughout the book. I think one of the great things about this project is that as people submitted their contributions, we didn't tell anyone what we wanted them to submit, right? It was up to them to pick and choose sections of the TJ Talbert book to see if they wanted to maybe add some updated wisdom to it or their own experiences, but they could also submit whatever they wanted. And one of the recurring themes that came out once we started pouring over all of the contribution submissions was that people are talking about getting back to this form of not the expert. So what we bring to the table as extension is not just expertise, but also really truly engaging with our communities and what that looks like. And our director from OSU Extension here in Ohio, Roger Rennekamp, his section was focused on, you may be an expert, but our role as extension professionals is to be a convener and is to make sure that people come to the table in our communities across the state to solve some complex problems and make a difference in our local and state and beyond communities. So Danae, with all of that said, anything that you want to discuss as to why you contributed what you did, and where are your thoughts in terms of engagement?
Yeah, so I wrote the section "Reach People Where They Are," as Jamie mentioned, and this sort of encompasses pretty much all of my work in a nice little paragraph. Engagement is really, really important. I teach primarily about digital engagement. So how do we engage people online in sort of non-traditional extension formats? And time again, I always hear people say, well, number one, it's not my job to do that. I wasn't hired to be a social media manager. I wasn't hired to be a video producer. I wasn't hired to, be a digital engagement specialist, whatever. I was hired to teach programs. So we get very pigeonholed into like the work that we think we should do based on what we've always done before. The second thing I always hear is, well, my clients aren't using that. My clients aren't on Facebook. My clients don't have internet. My clients don't do this. So I'm not gonna do that. And in reality, I think the more correct way of saying that is, well, my current clients that I'm currently reaching, they're not on Facebook. But think about all the people that you could be reaching if you just started to use some of these new tools. So so this section, the book that I wrote, really encompasses how do you find out where people are spending time? And this isn't just digital. My work tends to focus on digital, but it's just as important to do that in face-to-face programs as well. Where are people spending their time? And then how can you reach them in those digital spaces or face-to-face programs? Just incredibly important in terms of how do we engage people in a way that's meaningful to them, and how do we start to reach audiences that maybe we're not doing a super good job of reaching right now. Jamie and I have always said, like, we're not doing a really great job of like meeting the needs of our generation as like an entire clientele base, like that 20s and 30s. Chuck Hibbard said that last week at NCLC, like, what about our 20s and 30s? And I was like, yes. What about us? What about this whole demographic of people whose needs aren't being met? Maybe we do have a great clientele base right now, but when those clients start to age out of needing us, who's going to be left? Who are our relationships going to be with? We have to start meeting people where they are right now, whether that's on social media, whether it's face to face. We have a lot going for us, and we need to pick up some of those non-traditional formats of meeting people. So yeah, that's my work in a nutshell, in this nice little condensed, several paragraph part in this book.
All right, who's next?
So I'm going to say first that it's hard to pick a favorite part of the book, because for those that haven't had the opportunity to read through it, that obviously weren't involved in kind of the putting together of it, it's a fun and easy read. It's not like your typical professional development book that you're trying to struggle through. I mean, you want to turn the next page, you want to read the rest of the story, and see little illustrations of Daphne on a pogo stick with Augie following her around. I mean, it's just a fun way that it was put together. There it is. And so thanks, Bob. And but what I've got to say is some of the ones that kind of resonated with me, other than, learning to say no. That's an important one. There's a time to say yes in your career. There's a time to begin to say no to things. But I think it's in the learning chapter where I think Jamie and Paul and even Brad put in there, and Keith Smith, it's okay to admit you're wrong and to accept feedback and to learn from your mistakes, like we talked about earlier. I think, kind of as y'all were just talking about, we're experts, and we go and we speak volumes on very simple things to people because they ask us to. But every now and then, it's okay to admit that we've messed up, or that we were wrong about something, or to admit that I just don't know. And I feel like there's a lot of people in Extension that fear that. And so it's very that was one that kind of struck home with me, and that even I need to remember every now and then that it's okay to be called out for something, and to accept that you need to change the way you're doing things. So,
Hunter, one of my favorite parts was something you wrote at the beginning of your section that basically talked about finding your people, finding those people who are supportive, And I've heard people, even in the film industry, say the same thing. What changes for you when you find the people who are supportive and encouraging and kind of going along similar tracks, and you find your people? What difference does that make in the work that you do?
I'm guessing that a lot of us are the same way. When I'm having fun, I tend to be the best that I can be. And so maybe that's just because I'm still a kid at heart or whatever else. But when I'm around people that I enjoy being around, that it makes it very fun to work, and I'm around a bunch of positivity. I'm always an optimistic person. I can't help it. No matter how bad the situation is, I'm going to try to find the good in it. But whenever I'm around people that have that same mindset and that want to continue to push forward and be better and have fun while they're doing it, that just makes me a lot better too. And so the quicker that you find your people and the quicker that you put some of the other people on the back burner, I think the better that you'll be. You'll find your place in extension. No matter what stage in your career you are, if you realize that you're unhappy about it, it's probably not just the work you're doing. It's probably the people that you're surrounding yourself with. So.
Amen. Okay, Brad, I'm going to shoot you a question now. Okay, so one of Brad's sections, he had several in the book, which are all wonderful, by the way, so I can't pick a favorite, but this is one of them that I really like. So on page 84, Brad talks about being virtually professional and how important that is. To walk that fine line of having a personality and showing that you have a personality. Sometimes that can be a little hard in an academic setting, but feeling like you have permission to show your personality and who you are online. And so specifically talking about social media and how you present yourself professionally, but also personally, and what that means and what it looks like in practice. So Brad, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think I was on the forefront of social media when I came to the state office in Missouri 4-H, and now I'm nowhere near the forefront because everybody else is there, and it's great. But I was tasked with coming up with a social media policy for 4-H professionals in Missouri. And after some study, what I came up with is that you could try to do a thou shalt not list and just nail every possible indiscretion down. And that's just a fool's errand. What I found is that, we hire professional people. We ask people to trust their judgment, or we have to trust their judgment. And we ask them to be people who we can count on in those situations. And, extension professional faces a lot of different situations. And so our policy was essentially the expectations of your behavior online are the same as your expectations of your behavior in the non-digital world. And just like you might not do something that alienates people or denigrates people or, suggests that people who believe a certain way are all idiots, you wouldn't do that in your job. You certainly shouldn't do that online either, because the internet does not have business hours. It doesn't sleep. And whatever you do there is going to be there forever. So even Snapchat. So that was kind of the thought behind that. And there's something else I kind of put elsewhere in the book. But basically, as extension professionals, I believe we're there to create connection and not division. And it's really important that one thing I love about working with Extension is that we value people, not just certain kinds of people, not just certain people who believe certain ways or people who are attracted to this group or that group. We value people, period, and all are welcome. And so if we take that approach into our social media life and our internet life, as well as our professional life, it's just a win-win for everybody and certainly reflects well on us and our organization.
Yep. All right, so this is my last thing that I'm going to add, and then we'll do some final thoughts if anyone has anything else that they want to share before we're finished with the hour. But one of the biggest things in the book is Paul's lean knowledge worker process, and it's also on the mini poster that we have in every box. So Paul, I want you to take a couple minutes and just what's the wisdom behind this, and why did you feel that we needed to include it in the book?
Put me on the spot.
I am.
Okay, so I like to be productive, and I come at Extension from this angle of innovation and business. So one thing when I was kind of getting into extension, I learned there's so many things you have to do, and I was like, there's no way that I can do my job and then write journal articles on the side, and then what am I gonna? I got to give these national presentations to put on my CV and get promoted and all these things, and it's like there's got to be a process to this. And after talking to Dave and many other extension professionals who've been through there before, I learned that, hey, you don't work in silos. And when I mean, I'm not talking about collaboration, but you don't have your own work in silos. What you do is when you've started a program and you started ideating, you start with many ideas and kind of cross off the list, like, what are the things I'm going to do? And then you start working when the stakes are low, and start failing early on and evaluating early on when those stakes are low, so that you don't make these huge, massive, mistakes that cost a lot of money. And then once you've tested and you've iterated and you've built your program and you've involved the people that you're building it for along the way and you've co-created with them, then, hey, it's time to, start getting some funding, start writing those grants, not writing grants earlier on as if like you have got this wonderful idea that's just should be funded without any work or execution. And then you seek the funding. Once you've got that funding, you can scale up your work. You can scale it. You've already made micro impacts. You can scale up into these macro impacts. And then you've got something to write about. You've got something to present about. And so many times I've gone to national conferences and someone's talking about something and they never actually did it. It's just an idea. It's as deep as the 50-word abstract that they wrote that got accepted somehow into this peer-reviewed presentation. So then it's like, okay, you've made some traction, you've made some impacts, you've grown the program. Let's present about it. Let's write the journal articles. Let's derive some fact sheets from that, some of those best practices that you've applied and you've learned along the way. And then, hey, it's back to, what's the next thing? So that's kind of the process. And it's about, really what it comes down to. It's about starting early, starting with a lot of ideas, not falling in love and being romantic about that one idea that you had. And thinking if you build it and you build this perfect thing and you lock yourself in your office for 4 months to a year to develop this perfect problem, or maybe I even heard people taking sabbaticals to work on this perfect project, and they're going to lock their office and not talk to anyone. It's like, oh man, there's a better way. So that was kind of the thought behind that.
All right. So final thoughts as we wrap up. I think I'll have Paul show us what's in the box again for anybody that hopped on late. But while we're waiting on him to put it back together so he can unbox it again, anybody have final thoughts on the book? What you're proud of, how you think people should be using it, anything?
I'm just proud of the themes that resonate throughout. And one thing I saw was, be humble in your knowledge. It doesn't matter how right you are, or how much you know, if people aren't really receptive to what you have to say. And so I think themes like that really will help us all, and just inform us all. Sometimes there's things we know, but we just need to be reminded of. So I'm proud of that. I'm proud of some of the other themes that show up.
Yeah, I mean, I love this thing because for lots of reasons, because I got to work with you all, which was awesome. But this is an authentic piece of co-creation. Like Paul's talking about co-creating with our audience. Like there's so many scenarios where I can think somebody had the idea for this book, or they heard about, the idea for this book, where their reaction would have been, I can write that. Or, you know what, maybe I'll do interviews with extension people across the country, and then I'll compile it, and then it'll be mine. And that's not what happened here, to Paul and Jamie's credit, and I think everybody's credit. This is a true act of co-creation. I never heard a word, maybe Paul did, about why isn't my piece on this page, or why isn't my name bigger, or anything like that, or why didn't you put PhD after my title? You could have done that for me, Paul. It would have been completely false. But it was just an incredible experience of co-creation. And it shows what can happen when people get together on equal footing with positive intent. We can accomplish way more than any of us can accomplish alone.
Thanks, Bob. You know, this whole thing started, and it was it was on Twitter in 2014, and I screenshot it and shared it with Eric Staffney, who's not here, who's also contributed to the book. And we were talking. There's this Twitter thread. We were joking about the extension workers code and some of the outdated information, like, hey, when you're smoking, smoke, somewhere where you're not in front of people. And there's just some outdated information, like balance your checkbook so people won't trust you if you can't pay your bills. And then in that discussion, I said, hey, Eric, I think he said something, we need a new one of these. And I was like, hey, are you proposing a collaboration? And he's like, yes, I think I am. And it was cool to, take the ball and run with it and then get everyone involved. So if you act now, you can get your limited edition copy of in the gift box set of We Tried That Before, 500 Years of Extension Wisdom. How's this for a pitch, folks? So yeah, inside the book, when you get it, if you buy it this month, there's only 175 limited edition copies. Last I checked, there was like around 90 left. And if you get your copy, inside is the Extension Workers Creed on tissue paper. So you get that, and you can just throw it away. But that was just to keep the contents in place. Chuck Hibbard, he's one of the most amazing leaders we have in the system. He is the director of UNL, University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and he wrote the foreword. And this letter is encouraging everyone who gets one. And by the way, these 175 are for anyone who wants one, but we have sent one to every director. And so every director has received a copy of this letter where essentially he says, he's purchasing copies for his entire faculty and staff. And he hopes they'll do the same as an onboarding tool, but also, as Hunter said, and Danae, I mean, this isn't just for like newbies. This is for everyone in Extension, especially those who might be stuck. And so there's that letter. There's some information about your state's bulk order. So if you want to get a bulk order, we can get a way better deal if we order it like large quantities. So you can buy as few as 25 copies to as many as 500 in a lot. In some of the advice inside of the book is the importance of thinking and being humble and thanking your clientele and those who, your colleagues, those who give presentations and serve with you and support you and cover for you while you're sick. And so there's 5 thank you cards, postcards that you can write on and mail. There's illustrations. There's some illustrations from the book, and there is a cool poster that you can hang up. And there's the lean knowledge worker process, as well as an awesome quote by Jennifer Abel. It says, if you're always on the lookout for ways to take your work in new directions, you will never get bored. And then there's some things you can scribble on and think about. And of course, I would recommend keeping the book, or keeping the box. And Jamie came up with like the design for this awesome box. I was just going to send them in like a mailer and like just mail it, but she didn't think that was good enough. And so next thing I know, she's designed like the inside with the hashtag, and there's more quotes on either side. We've utilized every space to tell kind of the story and get people excited. But the book is about 130 pages. And we want to especially thank eXtension. On the back of the dust jacket is some information about eXtension. We pitched this idea to them and thought, hey, this would be a great project for the former innovation lab within eXtension. And they backed it, and they said, hey, this is a good idea. Go for it. And it took, I think, over 6 months longer. So we went over our deadline that we created. We actually were planning to have this done. Jamie, was this like in end of 2017?
Yeah, in the fall of 2017. So we're just a little over.
it's kind of late, but just so everyone knows, if you do put a book together, it takes a long time, and especially if you're working with an illustrator. And so this has just some information, contact or not contact information, but TJ Talbert's no longer with us, but there's just we want to make sure we note that this work was inspired by TJ Talbert and the Extension Workers Code. But better than just one person writing all this, great advice and wisdom, we thought let's bring in all the extension professionals we can to put this together. And it was great that so many people validated the work and the idea and put in the work to make this happen. So I want to thank everybody who was part of it. Thankful for Justin Jenkins, our illustrator, our graphic designer, who did all these cool, amazing designs and helped us organize the quotes. I would say that my favorite, I can show you my favorite chapter cover is chapter 7. And it's all about collaboration. And as you can see here, this picture is a saw, and it's like a two-handled saw, so you can work together to accomplish anything. So read the whole book, and that's a wrap.
We would love to hear everyone's thoughts too. And we talked a lot today with our co-authors to get their insight and their thoughts on what their favorite portions of the book were and quotes and things. And we really appreciate that. But we want to hear from everyone else too. So that's why we have the hashtag. And we're hoping that maybe this project can live on. And maybe we'll have a second edition of the book. Paul and I do not have to be in charge of that, by the way. Someone else can take that on. But, we would love to have a second edition of this eventually. And so there are places in the book for you to write your own notes down. There's field note pages at the end of every chapter. And if folks want to use the hashtag to share out their wisdom that didn't get included in the book, we will make sure that someone's capturing that so that we can keep track of it. And we'd love to know what everyone thinks. So any other final thoughts from any of our co-authors before we hop off?
Jamie, I wanted to hop on and just challenge folks, everyone on this webinar. It occurred to me, I received my book last week, haven't read it yet, but started looking through it, is that, man, this is great. And I was excited about it, but it occurred to me, the people who are excited about it and who are going to jump right on it are probably not the ones that need to hear it most. And I think some other speakers alluded to that also. So I'll challenge everyone to buy 2 books, buy one for yourself, and find a sneaky way to get it in the hands of that person that needs to hear it the most.
Great tip. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Thanks to all our co-authors that hopped on today. And like Paul said, we've only got about 90 of the gift boxes left. So if you don't snag one of those, you'll have to wait at least how many days? I think it's
going to be
9 weeks
the fall
for our second run of the book.
For the next order.
Yep, you'll have to wait till fall if you don't snag one of the boxes. So thanks, guys. Let us know if you have any questions. We'll be around on Twitter with the hashtag, and hope everyone enjoys it. It's exciting.
Take care.
Folks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks.